Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the person who changes your life isn't a hero in a cape, but a housekeeper holding a damp rag. What if the one moment you tried to help someone accidentally pulled you into a broken family's deepest wound? What if stepping through a forbidden door didn't just alter your job, but rewrote your future, your purpose, even your understanding of love? This isn't a story about perfection. It's about silence, trust, and the quiet war between grief and healing. A child who won't speak, a father who forgot how to feel, and a stranger who was never supposed to matter until everything depended on her. Stay with us, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about family, belonging, and the power of simply staying. Let's begin. No one was supposed to hear that kind of crying in a house like this. The Ashworth estate loomed over Willow Creek like a quiet fortress. Marble columns, arched windows, and a silence so heavy it felt intentional. Staff moved like ghosts here. Orders were given through clipped intercom messages, eye contact discouraged, curiosity punished. Cassie Monroe had lasted 5 days. 5 days of polishing baseboards and wiping down furniture she wasn't allowed to sit on. 5 days of being invisible. Until that morning. The cry sliced through the east wing like a blade. Not a whimper, not a tantrum, something primal. Cassie froze mid-swipe, microfiber cloth damp in her hand, heart slamming against her ribs. No one had mentioned a child. The 5th floor wasn't on the schedule. In fact, it wasn't mentioned at all. Stay clear of the upper levels, the butler had warned. Mr. Ashworth is very particular. But Cassie had grown up ignoring warnings. She moved fast, her sneakers silent on the marble steps. The cries grew louder, rhythmic, gutting. At the end of a narrow hallway, a flicker of light pulsed behind a half-open door. Inside, surrounded by untouched toys and untouched air, a boy sat on the carpet, rocking back and forth. His fists pounded his own temples in perfect time with his sobs. No nanny, no parent, just pain. Cassie didn't speak, not at first. She crouched near the threshold, her instincts torn between caution and something older. Something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Jamal. Her brother used to cry like that, used to rock beneath their grandma's dining table, silent fists against his chest, while the world told them both to calm down and be normal. No one ever understood. No one had tried, except Grandma Jo. Cassie pressed her palms flat to the floor where the boy could see them. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm not here to touch you, just here." The boy's rocking slowed. Not much, just enough. Then, with trembling fingers, Cassie signed one word across her chest. Safe. A motion she hadn't used since the funeral. The boy's eyes flickered to her. Just once. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Cassie turned, heart lurching. Dean Ashworth stood in the doorway in a charcoal suit sharp enough to cut glass. One hand clutched his phone, the other the brass doorknob, like he might rip it from the wall. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, standing. "I heard him crying and you thought breaking into a private room was acceptable?" His voice was low, deadly. "I thought he might be in danger." "He's my son. Step. Away." Cassie obeyed. But the moment Dean tried to lift the boy, Noah, the child shrieked, bucked, flailed in full-body panic. Dean froze, stunned by the intensity. "What's wrong with him?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Cassie stepped forward again. "May I?" He didn't stop her. She knelt, and the moment Noah felt her presence, he collapsed into her arms like gravity had given up. His small hands clutched her shirt, face buried in her shoulder. Silence. Dean watched, thunderstruck. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I didn't do anything," Cassie replied, rocking gently. "I just listened." "You know sign language?" "A little. My brother, he was nonverbal. This used to help." Dean's posture cracked, subtle but visible. The room, once drenched in tension, now felt still. The house had never heard quiet like this. "Your name?" he asked. "Cassie Monroe. I clean the East Wing." "You're not a therapist?" "No, sir." Dean hesitated. Then, slowly, "Can you stay a little longer today?" Cassie nodded. "Yes, sir." By the time she descended the stairs, her arms ached from holding Noah. She'd covered him with a weighted blanket and left the door cracked. She expected to be fired. Instead, Dean was waiting in the hall, not with security, but with a legal pad in hand. "In my office," he said. She followed. The room was all mahogany and glass, a desk too large for empathy. She sat across from him, hands clasped tight. You handled him like someone who's done it 100 times. I haven't, she said. Not with him, just with someone like him. Your brother? Jamal. He passed 4 years ago. Dean was silent for a long beat. Then, no professional's been able to calm Noah like that. Not in 2 years. You did it with a rag in your hand. I didn't fix him, she said quietly. I just saw him. The pen in his hand went still. I want to make you an offer. Cassie blinked. I need someone Noah already trusts. Someone real. Not another clipboard and a resume. I'll double your pay. Full room and board. Health coverage. No more mops. Her breath caught. That kind of money could pay off Grandma Joe's hospital debt, buy medicine, buy time. But it wasn't just a job. I don't know if I can, she whispered. If I fail him. You won't, he said, because you already did the one thing none of us could. You made him feel. She stared down at her chipped nails. Grandma Joe used to say, baby, if God opens a door, don't stand there arguing about the handle. When would I start? Tomorrow. Cassie nodded. Okay, I'll try. Dean stood and extended a hand. She shook it. Neither of them knew it yet, but something irreversible had just been set in motion. What would you risk to protect someone who trusts you without words? Have you ever been seen by someone when you most needed it and least expected it? Cassie thought she was stepping into a job. She had no idea she just walked into a war disguised as a family. In part 2, the silence begins to unravel, and so does the past. Cassie hadn't planned to stay. Not in this house, not in this life. She was supposed to wipe the windows, dust the railings, and leave quietly before anyone remembered her name. But now, every morning, she stood outside Noah Ashworth's door with a whiteboard in one hand and a box of sensory clay in the other, waiting, listening, learning how to show up without expectation. Noah didn't speak, not with words, but he'd started handing her puzzle pieces like small truths, lining them up in color-coded messages only she could read. Some days were quiet, some were storm. And on the hardest mornings, when Noah curled into himself and rocked to the rhythm of something he couldn't name, she just sat beside him, silent and steady. Dean watched all of it, from doorways, from the hallway, from behind the glass walls of a man still learning how to be vulnerable in a house built on armor. He joined them more often now, fumbling through basic signs, following Cassie's lead with the awkwardness of someone used to buying solutions rather than becoming part of them. One afternoon, when Noah pressed a blue block into his father's hand without flinching, Dean had blinked like he'd forgotten how to cry. It should have been enough, but peace rarely arrives without disruption. The knock on the front door wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of weight that empties a room. Cassie was in the kitchen, slicing apples for Noah's snack when she heard it. Dean opened the door with the cold efficiency of a man who hadn't been surprised in years, and then froze. 3 people stood on the porch, one in a gray suit, clipboard tucked under his arm, 2 others in plain clothes, eyes scanning the foyer like they were preparing for a case. Mr. Ashworth, the man said, tone clipped. We're with Child Welfare Services. We received a report concerning the well-being of Noah Ashworth. We need to conduct a home assessment. Cassie stepped into the hall just in time to see the color drain from Dean's face. That's absurd, he said. Who filed this? We're not authorized to disclose that during the initial visit. No one here is neglecting him, Cassie said, her voice sharper than she intended. She glanced toward the stairs. Noah was upstairs, safe, for now. I'm his primary caregiver. He's been stable, supported. The man turned toward her. And you are? Cassie Monroe. The name hung in the air like an accusation. I'll need a moment, Dean said, jaw clenched. He disappeared into his office. When he returned, he was flanked by his attorney and his private security advisor. You can proceed, he told the agents, but you'll be supervised, and you will not speak to my son alone. The inspection was swift and silent. They combed through the kitchen, the nursery, the therapy files, even the medicine cabinet. Noah never cried, never screamed. But Cassie could feel him withdraw. When one of the agents reached for his weighted blanket, he recoiled so hard he nearly fell. She caught him just in time, holding him until his fists loosened. No charges, No red flags. But just before they left, the lead agent turned to Dean. "Off the record," he said, "we don't see children this well cared for often. This report smells motivated." Later, after the agents were gone and the front door closed, Cassie stood in the garden with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Who did this?" she asked, the wind catching her voice. Dean didn't answer. He didn't have to. He knew. In his study, surrounded by security files and legal memos, Dean laid out the truth. Sylvia Warner, his former assistant, terminated 6 months ago, still had access to his schedule, still held a grudge. And now? Engaged to the COO of Stratus Corp, the very company Dean was preparing to acquire in a hostile takeover. They hadn't just filed corporate injunctions, they had weaponized Noah. Cassie felt the air leave her lungs. "They used your son." "No," Dean said, meeting her gaze. "They used you, because they know I can take a lawsuit. But if they threaten you, I unravel." Cassie turned away. Her hands shook. She didn't come here to be anyone's weakness. "You don't have to stay in this," he said gently. "I can move you out tonight, somewhere safe." "I'm not leaving him," she snapped. "Not now." Dean stepped closer. "Then you need to know what comes next. Press, headlines, rumors." She nodded. "Let them talk." That night, after Noah had fallen asleep with his fingers curled around her wrist, Cassie sat alone on the porch. Her phone buzzed. An anonymous message blinked on the screen. "You don't belong there. He'll find out what you really are." She stared at it for a long time before deleting it. The next morning, Dean stood at the kitchen island in a t-shirt and jeans, scrambling eggs while jazz played low on the speakers. It looked almost ordinary. Cassie leaned against the doorway, watching. For a second, she let herself imagine this was real. Not survival, not crisis. Just a kitchen, a man, and a child trying to become a family. But the truth was louder than the quiet. Cassie had a secret, one even Dean didn't know. She hadn't just been in foster care. She'd aged out in a group home under investigation for abuse. She hadn't just lost Jamal, she'd failed him. And if the press found that out, if Dean did, this whole fragile thing would collapse. She looked at Noah, then at Dean. For the first time, she didn't know which scared her more, being forced to leave or being allowed to stay. Have you ever feared that being truly seen might cost you everything you've built? In the next chapter, Cassie's past comes knocking, this time not with judgment, but with consequences. And not everyone will walk away whole. The morning after the court ruling, sunlight spilled through the Ashworth estate like it hadn't in years. Warm, golden, real. The house, once hollow with grief and echoes, now breathed like something alive. Noah sat at the breakfast table, his small fingers carefully arranging strawberries around the edge of his plate. Cassie watched him quietly, heart full and aching all at once. He hadn't spoken since that night on the porch, but the silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like choice, like calm. Dean walked in with 2 mugs of coffee. No tie, no armor, just him. He handed one to Cassie, and their fingers brushed. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The courtroom had named her protector. The world had seen her. The headlines were louder than expected. The maid who healed the air. Housekeeper or hero. But Cassie kept her head low and her roots steady. She wasn't here for applause. She was here for Noah. And, though she barely admitted it to herself, maybe for Dean too. She still hadn't told him the truth. The group home. The restraining order against a former foster guardian. The nights she'd slept in emergency shelters. How she'd lost Jamal not just to infection, but to a system that only noticed him once he was dying. She hadn't told Dean any of it, because in this house, she was someone else. Someone stronger. Someone trusted. But secrets have a way of showing up, especially when the doors start staying open. It was Noah who brought it up first. He stood in the doorway of the study one afternoon, a worn photo in his hand, the one Cassie kept tucked inside her nightstand. It was of her, Jamal, and Grandma Joe on a porch swing with rusted chains. "C'est you?" he asked. 2 words. Clear. Strong. Cassie froze. "Yes," she said. Her voice barely worked. "That's me." Dean turned in his chair slowly. He hadn't heard Noah speak since the trial. Now his son stood holding Cassie's past in one hand and his father's future in the other. "Who's the boy?" Dean asked gently. "My brother," Cassie said. "Jamal." Noah looked down at the photo. then back up. You miss him. Cassie nodded. Dean rose and walked to her. What happened to him? She looked down. He had a seizure. Complications. We couldn't afford better care. I was 19. I tried to get help, tried to get someone to listen. But her voice broke. They said I was too young, said I was unstable, said maybe I was the problem. Dean's expression didn't shift in pity. It shifted in recognition. That's what they told me when Emily got sick, he said. That I was too cold, too absent, that I didn't know my own family. Cassie's breath hitched. I built this house, Dean said, voice low, thinking if I made it strong enough, quiet enough, no more pain would get in. But it didn't stop the grief. It just kept out the people who might have helped carry it. Cassie looked at Noah, now quietly tracing his fingers across the frame of the photo. I stayed quiet too long, she whispered. I thought if I didn't tell you everything, I could pretend I belonged here. You belong here because of what you do, Cassie, not what you've survived. She looked at Dean, finally unguarded. You really believe that? Dean took her hand. I do now. The following weeks felt like spring blooming in slow motion. The three of them fell into a rhythm. Not picture perfect, but real. Dean cooked on Saturdays. Cassie taught Noah to plant sunflowers in the back garden. On the first day of May, Noah signed family without prompting, and no one corrected him. Then came the letter. Cassie found it in the mail basket, a cream-colored envelope with the state seal embossed on the corner. It was an offer from the Department of Child Services. They wanted her to join the state's new advocacy board. Her testimony had sparked interest across multiple agencies. They wanted her voice, her story. She showed the letter to Dean that night. This is big, he said, reading it twice. You'd be amazing. Cassie smiled. But it's in D.C. It's not a part-time commitment. It means moving. Dean said nothing for a long time. Then he nodded. It's your voice they need, not just your presence. What about Noah? She asked, softly. Dean's voice cracked. He'll miss you. I will too. But I don't want you to stay out of fear that leaving means the end of this. Cassie folded the letter, placed it on the counter. I don't want to leave, but maybe for once, I don't want to hide either. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He wandered into Cassie's room, holding his stuffed bear and looking small. She pulled back the blanket. He crawled in beside her, whispered one word into the dark. Stay. Her heart broke. The morning she left, the whole staff gathered at the foot of the drive. Dean carried Noah in his arms. Cassie crouched to hug the boy. I'll be back, she promised. Promise? Pinky promise. She held out her hand. He linked his. Dean walked her to the car. There's something I want you to have, he said, handing her a small box. Inside was the porch swing photo, now in a silver frame. On the back he'd written, You didn't just change our house, you changed our lives. Cassie looked up at him. What happens now? He smiled quietly. Now we all try. For real. As her car pulled away, Cassie glanced in the rearview mirror. Noah was signing something with both hands, messy but intentional. It was the sign for love. Cassie smiled through her tears. She didn't leave because she didn't belong. She left because she finally did. What part of Cassie's journey resonated most deeply with you, and why? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Where are you watching from? Tag a friend and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that healing is possible. Thank you for watching Life Stories.